You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Jon Mason, the founder and creative director over at SwingJuice. Jon, welcome to the show.
Pat, great to see you, and thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. Can we start out with an overview? What is SwingJuice?
Yeah, we're in the golf space, so we're based here in the U.S. We're based in the Northeast, just outside of Providence, Rhode Island, which is about an hour south of Boston. But we are a golf apparel brand. We're trying to really make a name for ourselves in this space where the golf demographic is really starting to get younger and more fashion forward and have a better fashion sense of a little bit different than what it typically has been over the last generation of golf apparel brands. But, you know, we're fun, we're laid back. We do a lot of great golf graphic t-shirts, polos, hats. You know, again, something that you can really dive into the golf lifestyle, but also tell a piece of yourself of, you know, how much you love the game and all the things, all the great things that go along with it.
Building upon that, for the audience, can you tell us what was SwingJuice, let's say 12 years ago, like 2012, 2013? How was the business different?
So it's interesting. I originally started SwingJuice back in 2004. So this goes back 2 decades now. So I'm 20 years into this crazy idea that I had. Originally, I came up with the idea of creating an energy drink beverage called SwingJuice Energy Drink. And the whole idea of it was to make a healthier version of what was typically on the market. So back during that time, the popular brands were Vitamin Water, Red Bull, Monster Energy Drink, and a lot of them obviously are still very popular today. But, you know, the way I was kind of approaching it, I loved the name SwingJuice. I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing baseball. I was in love and still in love with golf. And I just thought, you know what, let me try to create something that's different that really appeals to a golfer. And again, it was more of like, in my mind, I could see an opportunity that, you know, hey, maybe there's an opportunity to put something different out there that really isn't available. So, you know, over the course of a year, I really dove in to research what the beverage industry was because I had no experience. I didn't have a science background. I have a marketing degree from Providence College here, local college. And it was just like, all right, I really like the idea, but let me just do some research about it. So, you know, over the course of that year, I really came up with the formula for the brand, came up with the flavor profile of what I wanted, and got a bunch of samples made. And then, like I said, fast forward a year later from inception, idea inception, SwingJuice Energy Drink was born. And at that time, it was, again, I had no experience in the beverage industry. So it was simply just taking those samples and just knocking on doors, driving to golf courses, driving to grocery stores, finding out, is there a place on your shelf for our product? And it really was an amazing immersion into business 101, you know, sales 101. Like I said, at that point, I'd never really dove feet first into the kiddie pool of business, but this was an MBA course in business. And over a 10-year period, it grew the SwingJuice beverage brand from an idea to, at the peak of it, had about 300 accounts that were buying SwingJuice Energy Drink. So that went from 2004 and 5 to about 2013, 14, where it just is a really tough battle. Again, I was an independent distributor, an independent brand that didn't have the backing of large beverage distribution at the time. But, you know, again, I could just see the writing on the wall that, you know what, without that, this is going to be almost impossible to get the type of penetration that you need from a sales and marketing standpoint to make way. So it was around that time that I started to think, okay, let me pare down the beverage business, but I still love the brand and see where I can take it. And the first thing that came to my mind was apparel.
And it was so cool initially hearing your story. And I'm so excited to dive even deeper into it today. Because obviously, it's as you said, you went from having this really successful like energy drink company to ultimately focusing entirely on apparel. And what I really want to talk about today is that big pivot that you made, really focusing on like that 2012 to 2014 timeline. One thing I'd love to start out with, you mentioned the writing was on the wall, and that's when you started to think about the pivot. Could you elaborate on that? What was the writing on the wall? Maybe what was that first sign that you started seeing that led you to say, hey, maybe we're not going in the right direction long term with this energy drink?
Well, it's amazing when a lot of these things that happen as over the course of building a brand and a business, sometimes it's tough to see in real time and you really don't see it till you look back. But one thing that sticks out to my mind, and I've told this, story many times when people ask, is this was around 2012. I was producer. So just to give you a little background, in the region that we're in, the summertime is obviously the biggest time when people are buying this type of beverage. So really was trying to gear up for summer, March, April, May, May to September is, super busy season. And then, kind of come back around to planning for the following year. So this was about April of 2012. And I had a production run planned at the contract packaging facility that we produced the product. I had a run scheduled. And, I went down there. This was in New Jersey, so you had to drive 3-4 hours to get there. So I was down there ready for the production run. And then the production manager called me the day before and he said, Jon, I'm going to have to push you out a month. So that was kind of a big deal because here I am trying to get ready. I've promised customers that product is going to be on the shelves for Memorial Day weekend, which is a big kickoff to the summer. And I had no product and I was really unhappy with the whole situation. The manager said, look, Jon, I have Coca-Cola coming in. They're running vitamin water. We have to push you out. We'll get you back in. But they came in last minute and they need to run. And you know what? Vitamin water is going to spill more of their product in an hour than you're going to sell all year. So at that point, I was like, okay, maybe he's got a point. I literally was like, okay, there has to be another direction this goes, because if I'm going to constantly be pushed out of, and I have no control over that, it's really up to the production manager how they're going to do it. That was the first inkling of like, okay, I need to start thinking of a different direction. That either the brand goes or does not go. I still was in love with the brand and the brand idea, but that was really the first time I had to step back and say, okay, really assess the situation. Is this going to be the right thing to do?
Yikes. And yeah, I mean, to your point, I guess it's hard to compete if Coca-Cola comes in and says, hey, we need X amount of product for vitamin water. Maybe like we're your biggest customer. Like you better make sure that you serve us first. That's 100%. That's 100%. Hard offer to turn down.
Yeah, that was a real learning lesson. Like, wow, okay, I am the smallest fish in the big pond.
So that was like April, May. What did the next couple months look like? And when did you have like one distinct moment that really stood out to you where you said like very firmly, okay, this pivot needs to happen. I'm 100% sold on it.
Yeah. It was really a combination of that particular event and then just going through the rest of the summer with this in the back of my mind that, okay, this beverage piece. And again, on top of it all, it's just very stressful. I was essentially a one-man band and, kind of doing everything, and that you can only have so much energy to do everything on top of my first child during that time. So it was just like extremely, and that world too. So it was just a very stressful situation. But again, in the back of my mind, I really love the brand SwingJuice, like the name of it, the idea. In my mind, when I first started the brand, I said to myself, I want to make this a lifestyle brand. Didn't know what that meant, but I just had that in my head. As 2012 is coming to an end and we're getting into 2013. It's interesting. It's hard to believe this now, but back in 2013, social media wasn't what it is today. It wasn't almost an essential part of everybody's life like it is today. It was almost like a hobby back then, but that was really during the time when social media was starting to become a really important part of everybody's life. People were getting more comfortable making purchases online, let alone making purchases on their mobile devices. I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, here I am dealing with all of this inventory that I have to prepay and manage, and physically it's just much more intimidating than and I thought to myself at the time, because I was obsessed with golf, that I thought, okay, well, I was looking at the golf landscape from just being a fan of it. There's really no cool golf apparel companies. And again, you can Google back to 2013. There really was only a handful of brands that were doing anything remotely close to being cool. And that even takes out the large companies. I mean, the large companies were just kind of doing their thing, putting out golf apparel, but it wasn't anything like groundbreaking in my mind. So I thought, you know what, it would be kind of cool to come up with some like cool golf graphic t-shirts. That was my first thought. You know, there's, other than my opinion at the time, other than t-shirts that you would see that would say best golf dad or something like that, like very simple, something you get for Father's Day or Christmas or something. But I thought, you know, there's room for golf to grow into a fashion, to grow some fashion sense. So all throughout 2013, I literally that's all I could think about. I'm like, okay, this must be the next version of SwingJuice in my mind. So 2013 mainly became just sort of getting rid of the beverage inventory that I had. I had two really good friends that one was a graphic designer, one was a web developer. I got together with them. I wanted to make swingjuice.com a more e-commerce friendly website because, again, at the time it wasn't e-commerce friendly. It was just more of just like browsing to see what the product was. I got together with my graphic designer at the time and we came up with some fun graphic t-shirts, things that, again, they were more related to things that I thought were interesting that I just felt that other people might think it is interesting as well. Like we're wearing a t-shirt now, golf and tacos. Who doesn't like golf? Who doesn't like golf? Who doesn't like tacos? You know, so how bad can the two of them be together? So came up, you know, at the end of 2013 with about 10 graphic t-shirt designs in, you know, really as we were redesigning the website. And then fast forward to February 1st of 2014, just turned off the lights on SwingJuice, the energy drink, and turned on the lights to the SwingJuice apparel brand.
That is wild. So, Jon, diving a little bit deeper into the transition phase there, how did you approach that discussion? Let's say with a really passionate customers that you had. Maybe they were the people that were drinking SwingJuice energy drinks every day, or they were just huge fans of the brand. Did you reach out to them and say, hey, you know, over the next X months, we're going to phase out this product. We're going to be doing this instead. Did you more so just start adding in more so like the apparel element and then gradually phase out the energy drink? Could you walk us through what that looked like?
Initially, it was a gradual phase in the sense of in 2013, as I didn't commit to any beverage production runs for 2014. So the main customers that were our store base, they knew that there wasn't going to be an offering of beverage for the next year. So whatever was in store, I mean, obviously I didn't know everybody that was drinking the product. They would just see that the product wasn't available. And then I would get questions. And quite frankly, I just would answer the questions like, oh, we're looking forward to next summer, not knowing how the apparel was going to be received. They could have very easily said, all right, well, we're going out of business. That was an option on the table. It's just the communication was more or less with our core customers at the store level. And then the end users, I think the people I knew, obviously, that I could talk to, but the other people I didn't know, they just didn't see it available at the store that they would shop anymore. And that's when, once the apparel brand was launched, I really started to lean into social media because that was really the only way I could keep in touch with anybody that was a fan of the brand.
Definitely. Within the transition phase, and I might be totally off base here, but one of my assumptions is kind of around that time span, you went from getting X dollars in revenue coming in from energy drinks to all of a sudden seeing that number gradually start to go down as the product inventory became lesser, and then gradually bringing in the apparel sales from there. Walk us through, was there anything special that you did either really well or wish you had done differently, maybe to help on the cash flow side of things during maybe that just more volatile revenue period?
During that time period, I did take on other lines of work just to try to supplement this gap of probably about 6 months where nothing was happening. There was no money coming in. I had to output some capital just to get the apparel side launched. But it was really about survival at that point. I mean, again, because I had no idea if the t-shirt piece was going to work. I mean, the original plan was just to put out a few graphic t-shirts and just to see what happens. But again, going back to an indicator that I was on the right path. And it's interesting. I feel like every single point in my life and where I've had some sort of pivot or transition going back to childhood, I always feel like the right people or the right situation happens at the time that it's supposed to happen. I don't see it looking ahead, but it's always when I look back like, oh, okay, that happened when it was supposed to happen. It was an indication that things are going to be okay. The first day that I turned on the lights to swingjuice.com, again, the domain didn't change. It was swingjuice. So it was always swingjuice.com. The very first day that I turned on the lights to swingjuice.com, the apparel brand sold a t-shirt. Very first day, unsolicited, hadn't posted on any social media. Nobody knew it was happening other than two other people and my wife that this was, actually going on. So I immediately was like, okay, this is the right call. And then from there, it's been a roller coaster ride, a very good one so far.
That's amazing. Within the pivot, are there certain behind the scenes steps that either were far more time intensive or far more complex to roll out than you initially expected?
I think, and I go back to how I originally started the beverage. Again, I didn't know the apparel business at the time. And a lot of it was trial by fire, just doing research. I tend to do a lot of research. If I'm passionate about a project, I'll try to do as much research as I possibly can, and then try to follow people within that specific industry that either appear to be doing well or just are industry experts. And I think during that whole time period was really just as I'm trying to figure out the direction to go, just leaning in on certain industry leaders that within the golf space that I thought, okay. And then also leaning into people that I've met over the years. Okay, what do you think about this? Like, how would you approach that? Like really trying to tap into the minds of people that are a lot smarter than me, especially that know this, and really trying to juggle that. Again, trying to work a 9-to-5 job and trying to keep this going and trying to pare down the other part of the business. So really trying to find the time to do all that. But I do think it's all necessary to, if you want to have a successful outcome, which everybody wants to, but it's that grind behind the scenes work that nobody's watching, nobody's paying attention, but you just have to put the hours in to learn what you're getting into.
Now, and maybe to your point, aside from putting in the hours, doing the research, doing a lot of what at times I know can feel like grunt work, are there any other pieces of advice you'd offer, maybe for listeners who are either about to launch a pivot or they're just really heavily considering a pivot right now?
The one thing I always say, and I've been asked a similar question several times in the past, is just get out there and do it. You learn a lot just by failing. I don't think failure is talked about enough in entrepreneurship. I mean, it's more businesses and people fail at it than succeed at it. But that doesn't mean you're a failure for life. I mean, whether it be failing at starting a business or failing at trying something new within an existing business, I think doing is the one thing that is the only way you're really going to learn. And if you take those failures, it sounds cliche, but it really is true. I mean, you don't know unless you try. And if you may hit on something, but it may not work exactly how you want it to, but then you adjust it. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, at least that I've talked to, that are either in the idea phase or in the concept phase or even further along, but haven't officially launched a project, they get held back. They get fearful that, what if it's not received well? No, what if it's not received well? Then if you're still passionate about it, you just make a change and you can still push through.
Either you're right or you end up learning something great in the process based on how wrong you were.
Absolutely. No, there's no wrong answer, in my opinion. Just got to get out there and do it. I was in two different industries that I had no experience in before I started it. And I feel like the first 10 years of the beverage experience was great. And I loved it. I hated it, but I loved it. But it also helped spawn the next 10 years of the phase of the business, which same thing. There's love and hate moments throughout it all, but ultimately I love it. And it kind of keeps me going every day.
Absolutely. And I'll second everything you said on the failure front. I think I counted out at some point, I think prior to Intergrowth, I think it was maybe 7 failed businesses I had worked on prior to that, but very few people ever talk about those failures. You get a success rate of 1 out of 10, you're doing pretty damn well as an entrepreneur.
100%.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. That's why entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. It really can be a tough pill to swallow, and it's you against you a lot of times, and it can be very lonely. You know, the highs can be very high, the lows can be very low, but failure is part of it. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. That's for sure.
And I'd love to ask, speaking of failure, were there any phases of the pivot that looking back, you say, wow, I totally botched that. Like, I really wish I had done that part differently. Or similarly, I learned a ton from doing this completely incorrectly.
I think it's really the in-between phase of planning the pivot. Again, going through a period where neither is happening, but you're still sort of, you just have doubts. I think leaning into that failure piece, and again, it's hard to accept failure as a positive thing when you're sort of in limbo in between two different ideas or businesses. But, really like trying not to stress. Again, I'm an eternal optimist, and I just think, that everything's going to work out okay no matter what. I think really trying not to be so stressed and hard on yourself in those downtimes, because again, if you have a plan and you're passionate about it, it's going to work out at some point. You don't know when. It could be 5, 10, 20 years from now, who knows? But I think during those down periods, not trying to be so down, knowing that if you just keep working forward to the next day, it'll all work out. Let
me ask, for listeners that want to learn about SwingJuice, where should they go? What's the best way for them to learn more about the brand?
So yeah, swingjuice.com, that's really our central meeting spot. It kind of showcases all of our products and what we are as a brand. And across all social media, our handle is very simple, @SwingJuice, across all of the social platforms that everybody enjoys these days. And personally, my personal Instagram is the SwingJuice guy. I'm out there just trying to just be myself, have some fun. While we go through this crazy ride, and connect with us any way you can. Love to chat. And separately, if there's again entrepreneurs out there, feel free to reach out. I have a lot of experience in a lot of different areas, so I'll be happy to lend some knowledge where I can.
Jon, this was incredible. Once again, listeners, this is Jon Mason, the founder and creative director over at SwingJuice. Jon, thank you for coming on today.
Pat, thank you so much, and again, appreciate the opportunity to tell the story, and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.